In the late 1840s, we saw what is known as the gold rush along the west coast of America. But many don't know our friends down under in Australia also went through their own gold rush of their own during the exact same time. In 1851, a prospector discovered flecks of gold in a waterhole near Bathurst, New South Wales, Australia. After that, more and more gold was discovered in the many neighbouring states Australia has, but none found more than Victoria, which is home to Melbourne. The Australian gold rush, which had profound impact on the country's national identity, was a great chance for people from all over the world to have a reason to move to Australia. Within a year, more than 500,000 people who nicknamed themselves diggers rushed to the goldfields all across Australia. A majority of these diggers were immigrants from Great Britain, with the rest a mixture from Germany, Italy, Poland, and the United States. As immigrants flooded the various areas in Australia, excited for their new opportunity to make it rich, locals felt the need to join in. Leaving their stable jobs to seek fortune in the goldfield, wages in certain areas doubled as finding workers was increasingly more difficult during the time. This gold rush lasted about a decade, but the infrastructure lasted into the 1900s, where many gold mines remained operational. Although 50 years later, one of those diggers who immigrated from Europe was Modesto Varischetti. Coming from Italy in the early 1900s, Modesto was keen on any opportunity to support his family. Born in 1874 in Gorno of northern Italy, Modesto was pushed right into his first mining job at the age of 13. Gorno, being a mining town an hour outside of Milan, was widely known in the early 1900s as a mining town, so Modesto was destined at an early age to help out where he could inside the mines. Quickly marrying his wife Maria in the next few years, she would die while giving birth to their fifth child in 1905. While this was a traumatic event for Modesto's life, it was the spark he needed to take advantage of an opportunity to further his family's wealth and future well-being. For the past few years before her death, his local Catholic church had been suggesting he and other men go to Australia for the plentiful and abundant earnings in the mining field. Finally deciding he wanted to have a chance at making a fortune for his family, at the age of 25, he made the move to Australia with his two brothers. First looking for work in Clunes, Victoria, he and his brothers jumped back and forth from Italy to Victoria over the next couple years before settling down in 1906 in the town of Bonnyvale. Dubbed the Golden Outback of Western Australia, Modesto was attracted to the Westralia and Eastern Extension Mine that was located here. This extension mine, which was operational for the past several decades, sat between two valleys and was at the base of their connection. As this region is usually extremely dry with little to no large rainstorms each year, locals were never concerned about flooding in the area. That was until March 19, 1907. An unusual thunderstorm surrounded the town and nearby hilltops, and the storm dumped a few years' worth of rain in just 2 hours. Water rushed down every hill in the surrounding area as the local creek overflowed with an estimated 14 million gallons of water. The extension mine previously mentioned, being at the base of two large valleys, was a perfect spot for the water to congregate. As water began pouring into the main shaft, the diggers in the mine were quickly evacuated and promptly left the cave, out of fear of being trapped below. 200 diggers signed up for work that day, and only 199 made it out. Modesto Varischetti was the one digger that did not. Being in the L10 section of the mine, Modesto had no time to react as the rushing water caught him by surprise, nearly 1,000 feet below the surface. Fighting his way to safety, Modesto knew he had little chance of survival. Being backed into a corner of the mine, an air pocket formed which trapped him a good 720 feet below the surface. Initially, it was thought by those who evacuated that Modesto had drowned, simply due to the large volume of water that flooded the main shaft. But after fellow diggers and mine management heard tapping in the miner's code from below, they knew he had survived. A rescue team then gathered at the mouth of the cave and requested a high-capacity steam pump to be brought over immediately. It being only 1907, this high-powered steam pump slowly pumped water out of the cavern, but by a few hours later at nightfall, the water level only dropped by a few inches. A local mining inspector, Josiah Crabb, reported that the clearing of the shaft would take up to a week, and there was little chance of rescue. Newspapers all around the world took this quote and dubbed Modesto Varischetti the Entombed Man. They published daily papers throughout the ordeal, recounting on Modesto's signaling, calling it pointless and hopeless, saying that he would certainly suffocate or starve before the water level was low enough for rescue. On day 2 of the rescue, a chance remark by Crabbe's then 7-year-old son John triggered a dramatic light bulb moment. The young child said, "Why don't you use a diver, Dad?" Knowing he was right, Crabbe sent for Frank Hughes and Thomas Hearn from Calgary. These deep-sea divers had the diving equipment and the know-how to get to Modesto and free him. Frank and Thomas, having never dived a flooded cave before, knew they would need experts in the caving field to assist. The two called on Herbert Hoover to direct the rescue. Hoover, the then manager of the Gwalia mine in Kenona, was the highest qualified mining engineer in the goldfields that week. The future US president played a huge role in coordinating and managing the rescue, but in all, by the 3rd day, the rescue group had consisted of around 160 people, ranging from diggers to police to divers to many other government officials who all gathered to help rescue Modesto. Unfortunately, the one piece of equipment the divers didn't have was a long enough air hose to reach Modesto. The nearest air hose long enough to reach him was 350 miles away in the city of Fremantle. Government officials stepped in and ordered the special speed train named the Rescue Special to deliver the hose. Cutting off 2 hours of the usual 12-hour train ride, the delivery was in record time for that specific route and distance. Having acquired the air hose, Frank Hughes made his first exploratory dive on the 4th day of Varichetti's ordeal. Having a hard time finding Modesto, he and Hearn made 3 separate descents on day 5 and 1 on day 6 when they first located the trapped man. Hughes then resurfaced as Hearn stayed with Modesto, bringing back a powerful electric lamp, food, candles, and sealed letters of encouragement from his brother Giovanni. The divers were forced to leave him. They had no reliable way to free him, as it was too much of a risk to gear up Modesto and resurface. The divers would resurface as time wasn't on their side. The steam pump was working, but the rescue plan became more desperate as Hughes told Crabbe on day 8 that Modesto would not survive much longer. On day 9, their prayers were answered as the water level dropped enough to allow for an exit attempt. The divers brought one last load of food and water to the miner and shared a cigarette with him. They then tied a rope around his waist and started the arduous walk through waist-deep and knee-deep sludge back to the surface. Although the water level was low at some stages, at its very worst, Modesto was forced to push his face towards the top of the cave as his mouth and nose only just cleared the water, allowing him to breathe. Modesto Varischetti staggered back to the surface on March 28th after enduring a total of 206 hours underground. Modesto went on to say that the main thing he could remember about the 9 days trap was that it was extremely dark, extremely dirty, and extremely wet. After the rescue and a short period of recovery from the ordeal, Modesto returned to the mines for the next decade. Dying nearly 23 years after this incident at the age of 56 from a short battle with fibrosis, Modesto will be remembered forever for that fateful day in March of 1907. Buried in Calgary Boulder, Modesto's legacy lives on through a classic Australian folk group called Cloud Street, with their most famous song being called Down the Coal Mine. Also through the city of Calgary, who set up a display to honor Modesto's story and those who helped rescue the man over a century ago. That is the story of Modesto Varischetti. If you want to hear more scary, fascinating stories, make sure to check out last week's video.